This is Judy Gautier from Bungalow Quilting and Yarn. I'm going to talk to you today about making something that I love to do at Christmas time because it's a useful gift that everybody needs and everybody wants. It's not just another piece of something that people are going to say, oh, I have too many of this or too much of that. And that's making pajama bottoms. Pajama bottoms are fun and they're easy, and everybody, like I said, will find them useful and need them. Now what I want to talk about is how to make it much easier by doing fewer seams. You see, this is their typical, there's a little rip in this pattern right here. Or no, it's not a rip. Typical pattern with the crotch seam right here. Okay, and this is the top where the waistband would go. And then here are the side markings where you can see what size you're going to choose for the individual that you're making these for. Now, one thing that I emphasize with doing these is that you might want to lay, and it's an extra step and it takes a little more time, but it's going to save you a lot of money in the long run, is take a piece of interfacing, non-iron-on, non-woven interfacing, and trace your pattern onto the interfacing, because if you do that and you're making somebody a small and you're cutting out the small, you will not be wasting the rest of the pattern and the rest of the sizes. If you trace your particular size onto your piece of interfacing, then you can use that over and over again, and you can use that same pattern over and over again without having to run around and try to find a new one. So you can see we've traced this pattern onto this non-woven, non-iron-on piece of interfacing. Okay. So once you've done that, I think we chose a small because this is for a friend of mine who I'm helping her to make these pajamas for her son before Christmas. And over here you can see that you have a side seam and then the crotch seam. Okay, that's the way most patterns are. And the side seam, you can actually lay one over the other so that that's one less seam. Now, this confounds people to some extent because they're fixated on the straight of grain line, and if you do this, you won't be exactly sewing perfectly on the straight of grain. And as a matter of fact, you'll be, probably slightly on the bias. But when you think about it, the part on the top where you're actually going to have or need more give is right around your hindquarters. When you're sleeping, you're thrashing around, and having a little bit of stretch and not having it perfect is not a big factor. Some patterns actually come this way now, where there is no side seam. They just have a piece that looks like this. See that? Where there's no actual side seam. This is the side seam here. And what we're going to do is we're going to lay that over each other, but we're going to match up the sizes. So here is the extra large, large, medium, small, and extra small. Okay, so for this young man, we are doing the small. So here's the small marking on the pants back, and here is the pants front, and the small is right here. So we're going to put the small here to the small here, all right? And we're going to lay that over the top, because that's where your seam would be, or your cutting line anyways. Your cutting line would be there. Now remember, pajamas, you do want them to be a little bit looser because you are thrashing around at night, moving around. You don't want them to be skin tight. So when you lay cutting line to cutting line, you're actually giving them a couple more fractions of the inches, in size, because you're laying cutting line to cutting line here. And you're not including the seam. Okay, so you do that, and then you move it down, and you continue to lay cutting line to cutting line. But then when you get closer to the bottom, the legs would be way too wide if you did that. Okay, at the bottom. So we actually move it in slightly. Okay, we actually move it in slightly. So now you can see the shape. The shape is one piece. It's just one pattern piece. Then you're going to cut, well, you're laying it on two pieces of fabric, but you're only making one cut. You're only cutting one piece. Do you see that? So that's the piece that you're going to lay your interfacing over. And you might need two pieces because interfacing isn't sold this wide. So you're going to join two pieces of non-woven interfacing, and you're going to trace that, and you're going to make all the markings on it that you need to make sure that you're matching it up. So that way when you lay it on your fabric, you're only cutting one piece. Okay, so we did that. And we made this one pattern piece here. Okay, out of the interfacing. And we made, sorry about that, the other piece right here. And see, she marked that line there, that size line, so that we could join those up, because that one piece of interfacing wasn't wide enough to cover the whole pattern. So there you go. So you're only cutting out that one piece. So then what you're going to do will follow next. Stay tuned.